I'm not a huge fan of hyping up top 10, top 12 list cuts, but this one is different. Elijah Griffin, including the Louisville Cardinals in his top 12, is a huge sign that good things are coming for the Cardinals in the future. We'll explain why on today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome in to another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. And as always, I want to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast, free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. All about football. In today's episode of the show, we'll talk about the Cardinals making a list cut for one of the top 5 recruits in the country. There's a highly touted running back that will make a visit to Louisville's campus. And then we'll also talk about Isaac Guerendo balling out at the NFL Combine. Obviously, if you can't tell by now, if you're watching this on YouTube, then you can. But if you're listening to this, you may be able to tell audio-wise. I am in a different recording space due to connection reasons. Had to switch my recording space, but there's no backdrop. Working to get on that to where the background is not so bland. And audio-wise, I'm sort of testing this out. If the feedback on this is bad, then I do apologize for the audio quality and clarification. And if it's bad enough to where we feel like I need to make another change, then I will do so and continually find the best place for the audio recording. So do want to get that out of the way before we start. But like I mentioned in the opener, I'm not a huge fan of putting a ton of significance in top 10 list cuts, top 12 list cuts, anything really above top 5, because at that point, it's almost like you're reiterating, hey, look, here is the offer sheet. Locked On Podcast Network national recruiting analyst Brian Smith was on the show last week, and he said that essentially these types of list cuts are all about the publicity, getting some attention from fan bases and much more. So it is all about getting players on campus for official visits and making that top 5 if there is a top 5 release. But top 8, top 10, top 12, it's almost like you're reiterating, hey, I was offered by this program. So I don't take a ton of significance from those. However, this situation is different. The Cardinals landed on the top 12 list cut for the number 1 defensive lineman in the 2025 class. According to both 24/7 Sports and the 24/7 Sports Composite, he is ranked as the 3rd best player in the country. He is Elijah Griffin from Savannah, Georgia, plays for Savannah Christian Prep. And as I mentioned, the Cardinals included in the top 5 list cut, along with USC, Colorado, Georgia, Miami, Florida, Clemson, South Carolina, Oregon, LSU, Duke, and Alabama. So a ton of Power 5 flavor, obviously, in this top 12 list cut. So I don't want to put too much significance into this from he might land, in Louisville. I'm saying this because just because Louisville was included in this particular top 12 list cut, it's foreshadowing for good things to come for this program in the future. I know this isn't probably something that you're looking at thinking, oh, well, great. What are the chances that Louisville lands this type of a prospect? I'm going to be completely real. Probably slim. I imagine he's probably a Georgia lean, being from Savannah, which is just about southeast from Athens. I'm not a geographical expert, but I would imagine that it's less than 2 hours away from Georgia's campus. If it's longer than that, then it's not much more. So Georgia, then you have SEC flavor, some top programs. Clemson's are in that corridor as well on the southeastern part of the United States. So long story short, it's going to be an uphill battle for the Cardinals. But just because Louisville was included in this list cut, that is significant in itself because of the profile of recruit that Elijah Griffin is. Elijah Griffin is probably going to be a day one starter for whichever program he chooses. Not only is he likely going to start, but probably standing out. You're talking about a projected first-round draft pick in 3 seasons, or after 3 seasons of his college ball. Andrew Ivins, director of scouting for 24/7 Sports, says that he's a large athletic defensive lineman with exceptional get-off at this stage in his development. Checked into the National Combine back in January of 2022. Goes on to say that he has gotten taller. He's about 6'5" now, 285 pounds. Has a nearly 35-inch vertical, which is incredible. Does play in the lower level of classifications in Georgia, but basically states that the eye test shows you everything you need to know. Comfortable working as a 4 or 5 technique and a 4-3 front, but figures to eventually kick inside as he continually grows into his frame. Has an 80-inch wingspan with 10-inch hands. Wins plenty of battles with his heavy hands and a lower pad level, but will eventually need to get better at redirecting and learn how to not get washed away. Rare physical traits combined with natural feel for the position give him one of the higher ceilings in the class of 2025. So if a player is ranked inside of the top 5, your instinct is to tell you that theoretically they're going to perform, and they're going to perform right away. If a player like Griffin were to commit to Louisville, I don't have to tell you how monumental it would be. He would be the highest ranked commitment in program history, and it would be borderline unprecedented for this program. But just that the Cardinals are included in this list cut is significant. Why is that? Well, we've seen really ever since the Cali to the Ville movement, the pendulum has started to shift towards Louisville going after the occasional 4-star, but mainly making their classes up with 3 stars, to the Cardinals being involved with multiple 4-stars, taking multiple 4-stars in classes. Still, I wouldn't say supplementing, but building the foundation of a class with mainly 3-star players, but being involved with more 4-star guys, being in a better spot in terms of recruiting with these 4-star players. They've gotten very highly ranked commitments. TJ Capers, Stanquan Clark, Aaron Williams, Pierce Clarkson. And this really isn't something new. I mean, Louisville has really, ever since I began watching football, which was back in 2004, the Cardinals have added the occasional 4-star player, and they've had the occasional highly ranked player, 5-star level guy. But most of those players were from the area. Michael Bush, Brian Brohm, etc. You look at some of the players, James Quick, all from the city of Louisville. To be included into a top 12 list cut from a player not only in the top 5, but plays in the state of Georgia, which is a hotbed for recruiting, it's extremely positive news, and it offers a bit of foreshadowing for the future because it continues to push the narrative that the pendulum continues, gradually, I might add, to shift in Louisville's favor in recruiting. Will they ever become a program that adds multiple multiple 5-star level guys in a class? No. I mean, if they get a 5-star, you're feeling, to be in very good shape. But you're in a situation to where the more you get included in these lists, now it's going to be an uphill battle. Your best opportunity is to get him on campus for a unofficial visit and work to try to build that relationship and try to get an official visit. And I know that, there was the tight end from Arizona, Deuce Robinson, was a player that, visited campus. You had, I'm forgetting his first name, but the younger Uaga Lole brother that visited campus. Still, it's huge because those are 5-star level guys, but this is a top 5 prospect. It's huge. I know that TJ Capers committed to the Cardinals as a top 10 prospect. That is incredible, but he dropped pretty significantly in the rankings even before he reclassified. So it's monumental here. It's not really unprecedented that Louisville is involved with a 5-star player, but with the being a top 5 player, it even raises a little bit more in the caliber of recruitment that you're going into. So I don't put a ton of significance into top 12 recruiting list cuts, but for this one I will, because it is foreshadowing for things to come for the Cardinals. So ultimately, I am extremely excited to see if Louisville is able to get him on campus and get to a spot to where you're feeling pretty decent about at least being in the conversation. So it's going to be an uphill battle, and we'll see how Louisville is able to respond over the next couple of months. But we're going to continue in the state of Georgia for this recruiting update of the show. The Cardinals recently got or are getting a visit for a highly touted running back in the 2025 class. Lucas Farrington will make a visit to the 502 in the later part of March. Pretty significant, and Louisville will look to add at least one running back in the 2025 class. We'll talk about Farrington here momentarily after we talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your venture to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes, and the perfect mid-size crossover for your next adventure. I'm also a big fan of the Nissan Armada. It will change what you expect from a full-size SUV. Picture a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury and style. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On has launched the first ever national 24/7 sports streaming channel on YouTube. Now you can find it on Amazon Fire TV's channel on the free app, which is hosting all of your teams nationally 24/7, 5 days a week. So be sure to stay tuned on all streaming services, including YouTube and the free Fire TV channels app. Continuing to discuss 2025 recruiting as it relates to the state of Georgia. Before we went to break, we introduced the name Lucas Farrington. Farrington is a 3-star level recruit that is seeing his stock rise more and more. He is currently ranked as a 3-star level running back, according to Rivals.com, from the Atlanta area. At Woodward Academy, plays in a very solid area of competition. This past season as a junior, 1,100 rushing yards and 300 receiving yards. Now we know that the Cardinals are going to have to replace likely Penny Boone, likely Don Chaney Jr., and who knows, Maurice Turner will be a senior, Kewan Brown will be a redshirt sophomore, and then you expect the 2 4-star level guys, Isaac Brown and Duke Watson, to stay with the program. But if the guys who leave actually do leave, or who we think will leave, the Cardinals will have 4 players at running back, and that's considering that somebody doesn't transfer out, which you never really know. But Lucas Farrington has scheduled some unofficial visits. He scheduled 5 of them. And if you thought that, well, maybe the ranking is a little bit underwhelming, and I understand that he isn't even ranked on a couple of recruiting services just yet, but let me tell you the visits that Farrington has scheduled, and you can sort of take things into consideration for what you will. Farrington has scheduled 5 visits. He starts out on Louisville's campus on March 9th. Actually, I mentioned it later in March. That's actually this weekend that he will be on campus. So the Cardinals getting going early in the month of March as spring practice gets closer and closer. After that, he'll go to Georgia Tech, Tennessee for the remainder of that week. And then he will be in Miami March 23rd and conclude his visits at Ohio State. So currently ranked as a 3-star running back, 5'10", 195 pounds. Like I said, plays in a very good area in Georgia, in the Atlanta area. One thing that's interesting to me is that he spent time this past season lining up both out of the backfield and in the slot. Don't forget, I mentioned 300 receiving yards, and I also think that that's sort of an underrated skill that Jeff Brohm maybe doesn't come out and say that he's looking for. But you look at some of the running backs that he had at Western Kentucky. You look at Purdue. One of the traits that I can find similarities in is the ability to be a multi-dimensional running back and being able to not only carry the ball out of the backfield, but also be a solid receiving option. When you watch him play, it's like watching a guy get shot out of a cannon. He is extremely explosive, getting through the line of scrimmage, has an explosive first step, and not to mention, I think that helps him become a very adequate receiver as well, but does well in between the tackles, very elusive, like I mentioned, a quick first step, but has a mixture of both speed, speed, agility, and power, because yards after contact seem to be high as well. You look at this situation, you watch the huddle tape, and I know huddle only shows the good plays, but it will paint the picture of a player that's elusive, but if you're not careful, he'll run you over and get into that second level of the defense. So it's pretty critical for the opposing defense to wrap him up early, because if not, those legs are still churning, and you give him an opportunity and give him a window, and it will be a house call. So right now he has almost 20 offers. Now, granted, you look at the offer sheet and it's going to continue to grow. Louisville's not the only Power 5 offers. He's got Arkansas, Colorado, Duke, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Missouri, Purdue, and those are the Power 5 offers. But he's going to continue to pick up offers in camp season as the spring semester in his junior season continues. I look for him to increase his stock to where ultimately it would not surprise me if he is a top 500 recruit in, let's say, by mid-October. Give him a little bit of time as a senior, but plays in an area where I feel like it's easy to get overlooked if you are a very quality player because of the sheer amount of solid players that are in that small area. It happens in Florida. It happens in Texas, happens in California, and it happens in Georgia. One thing that I like is that Louisville is going to at least continue to make it an effort to recruit the state of Georgia. The Peach State has been very good to this university over the past 2 decades, and I hope for that to continue. And we've seen that with a couple of players that they've recruited. Madden Sanker came from Georgia. Kewan Brown, who we just mentioned, is from the Atlanta area. And I think that because Louisville plays in Atlanta against Georgia Tech sometimes, that could definitely help out the Cardinals in this situation. But you're going to have some stiff competition. I truly think that he's going to pick up some big-time offers if he competes in these camp settings. So unofficial visits are great, but again, not the end-all be-all. So what's the timeline here? Well, March 9th, he makes that visit to Louisville, and hopefully pretty quickly after that, I'm talking after the first string of unofficials are over with Georgia Tech and Tennessee before the Miami visit. Theoretically, you're hoping to lock in an official visit for either late in the spring, early in the summer. Who knows? Maybe even the spring game on April 19th. You know that Jeff Brohm and company like to try to get ahead in recruitments to be the first to the party, try to gain a commitment, and solidify a relationship before the big dogs come calling. So we will see how Farrington's recruitment plays out, but great that the Cardinals are able to get him on campus this early. So speaking of running backs, I know we talk about Isaac Guerendo being a potential NFL draft sleeper. Well, might not necessarily be a sleeper any longer after he put on a historic testing clinic at the NFL Draft Combine this past week. And we'll talk about Guerendo maybe rising into day 2 consideration here momentarily after we talk about our friends over at FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with the quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel is the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Have yourself a weekend, Isaac Guerendo. What a performance the former Louisville Cardinal running back put on in front of the NFL draft scouts, in front of the national audience up in Indianapolis at the NFL Draft Combine. Let me set the table and tell you what exactly he was able to do, because it starts out impressive and then it gets even more impressive. So he tested on Saturday. He ran a 4.33 40-yard dash. First off, for a man his size, known truthfully as a power back, being 6'1", 225 pounds, to run a 4.33 at that size, it's incredible. There are many adjectives that could, fill into this equation. Incredible is the first one that comes to mind. That is first among running backs in the NFL Draft Combine. 41.5 vertical jump, which, you guessed it, first among running backs at the NFL Combine. Had a 10-foot 9-inch broad jump, which he was slacking here, second among running backs at the NFL Combine. So really challenging to see how he could have done any better in front of scouts to prove that, hey, look, I understand I was in sort of a Robin role to Jawar Jordan's Batman for the first part of the season, but when my number was called, I balled out. I had 810 yards on 132 carries. I averaged 6.1 yards per carry, and I found the end zone 11 times. So I get it. Guerendo, known as an NFL draft sleeper, in my opinion, probably late day 3. He might still be day 3, but I guarantee, and this is no inside information, but I would not be surprised in the slightest if there are some people or some NFL teams that are looking at their NFL running back board and there's no clear stars. I mean, you have some solid running backs like Trey Benson, Jonathan Brooks, Bucky Irving. The list goes on. Braylon Allen. You can name a handful more running backs. Blake Corum. And they're thinking, okay, can we draft a guy in the 3rd to 7th round? I would probably argue that Guerendo goes before the end of the 5th round. Can you find a guy that can join this team right away and produce immediately, be a diamond in the rough type player? Guerendo doesn't have a ton of tread on the tires at this point. Yes, he's played 5 collegiate seasons, but he doesn't have over, he doesn't have over 250 carries in his career. in college. I understand, he's going to be an older running back, but in terms of usage, not necessarily all that high compared to some of the other options. One thing I also find interesting is that according to the RAS at the Combine, which is standing for Relative Athletic Score, Guerendo scored a unofficial 9.99. The highest possible you can get is 10. From when this measurable statistical average came out in 1987, up until this point, Guerendo ranks as the second highest score out of 1,745 running backs. I understand that all these are testing numbers, but the tape is there as well. Guerendo has incredible ability to increase speed quickly. Acceleration is key. Very solid between the tackles. Can win those or can get to the edge and get to the second level of the defense. He's not just a power back. That's what we have to get out of in terms of line of thinking as we get into this sort of groupthink type mode where we consider a player, well, he's one-dimensional. No, Isaac Guerendo is 123% not one-dimensional. He is going to be a player that went from, who's this guy? Oh, yeah, that guy at Louisville. Whoa. Press the brakes. Pause. Let's do a little bit more research because shelf life in the NFL for a running back, it's short. Statistically, when guys hit 30 years old, it's like this proverbial downfall to where their careers immediately go on a decline. Now, you have some players that defy logic there, but for the most part, that's the trend, is that you get about 7 to 8, maybe 9 good years from a running back, and a lot of successful teams will use a running back for the entirety of his rookie contract and not extend or re-sign that player and just start the process over. One thing I think will work in Guerendo's favor is that he's not a project type running back. He's going to be a player that, regardless of system, is a guy with ready size and elite speed for the class that will be able to rise in and either be a change of pace short yardage player, or in the right system, he could be one of the Isaiah Pacheco's of this year's class, to where he gets drafted in the later rounds. And guess what? Boom. You're wondering 4 months into the season, like, how in the world did this guy fall to insert pick selection here? So Guerendo's testing, I think, just really kind of confirms my notion that this guy's the real deal, and he's going to rise up draft boards potentially to the end of day 2 into the 3rd round. So that's going to wrap up today's episode of the show. We will continue football recruiting talk, some basketball talk as well. The remainder or the regular season finale is this Saturday. But that will wrap up today's episode of the show. Everyone have a great day. Have a great start to the week. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.